We hope you enjoy listening to this podcast of St. Louis on the Air, brought to you by University College at Washington University. With undergraduate and graduate programs, part-time, evening, and online. University College at Washington University, offering world-class education within reach.
Welcome to St. Louis on the Air. I'm Don Marsh. There are not too many former West Point cadets who can claim a successful comedy career, but St. Louis can claim one of them. That would be comic Greg Warren. He has performed on network television, radio, club venues all over the country. This week he's got a gig in his hometown, performing Thursday through Sunday at the Funny Bone in Maryland Heights. And right now he joins me in studio. Greg, nice to see you again.
Good to see you, Don. I probably need to clarify, I spent 1 year at West Point,
obviously as a cadet.
Yeah, you're supposed to go for 4. I was what they called in the Army a quitter, Don. I stayed for the first year and then transferred.
Well, having read about some of the things you've said about that particular experience, what the heck was going on with you?
Well, here's how, as best as I can explain it. I was at Kirkwood High School, and I was a pretty good wrestler. And the wrestling coach called me from West Point one day, and
your dad was a wrestling coach.
My dad was my high school coach. Yeah, thanks for remembering that.
Yeah.
So the coach called me, and he said, "Hey, we'd like you to come to West Point." And the next day, I was sitting in journalism class. You'd appreciate this. And Liz Miller was sitting next to me, and Liz was she was pretty much the prettiest girl in our high school. And I said, "Liz, the wrestling coach from West Point called me last night, and he wants me to go to West Point." And she said, "Wow, that's pretty cool." That's it, Don. That's pretty much the reason why. That's why I went right there. Yeah.
I would have been more impressed than Liz was, apparently. I mean, that's but an athletic scholarship to West Point is a little bit different than some of the academic achievements.
Well, actually, yeah. I mean, everybody that goes to West Point is actually not only on scholarship. You're paid. You're a soldier. I mean, you're yeah.
You know, I think, Greg, this is a time when we need comedy. We need comedy more than ever. Wouldn't you agree? We need comedy and comedy.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I mean, it's no secret that we're a very divided country. I don't talk about politics at all in my act, and I actually enjoy some comics who do. It's just personally, we're so divisive in every other part of society that it's like that space, the comedy club. I really don't want. I don't want anybody to feel like they're alienated there. So
yeah, because half the people are going to be ticked off at you.
Yeah, if I start talking, no matter what you say, no matter how you feel, half the people are going to get up and leave.
Where do you draw your material from?
I mean, I think it's. I think the job as a comedian is to notice things around them, and I sort of have a process where I sit wherever I am in the country. I'll sit in a coffee shop in the morning and just journal and sort of like, hey, where did I? It's really hard to sit down and say what's funny, but if you can start with what interrupted the continuum of the day, what happened over the last 3 days that seems a little different than things that usually happen, a lot of times you can turn that into what's funny. I'll give you an example. A few years ago, I was living in New York City, and I was doing an audition for a commercial, and it didn't go well, and I was sitting on the subway. And it was just a bad series of events. And I remember thinking to myself, I really would appreciate just 3 minutes of silence on this subway. If I could just have that, I would be very grateful. And a minute and a half later, this lady just walked on the subway and she started singing, "All I want for Christmas is a fish sandwich. All I want for Christmas is a fish sandwich. I was like, lady, it's not a song. Well, Don, guess what song has been stuck in my head for the last 3 years? That woman should not be homeless. She's a hit maker. She may be one of the greatest lyricists of our time. Like, I've heard 11 Taylor Swift songs. I don't know the words. I know all the words to Fish Sandwich. Now, when I sat down, so that happened, and a week later I was just sort of sitting down in a coffee shop in Queens, and I was like, what happened over the last, nothing's funny, what happened over the last week? And I was like, well, there's that fish sandwich lady. Yeah. At the time that happened, I promise you, nothing seemed funny about it to me. I was, just despondent that I hated New York, I hated the subway, but I was like, well, that was a thing that happened, maybe there's something there. And then, a month later, I was like, got into a format where I could try to talk about it on stage, and then it became a bit that I did.
And you've just planted an earworm now in the minds of thousands of people listening.
Tomorrow morning, everybody in St. Louis will be showering, singing "Fish Sandwich," and they'll all hate me. But
when you come up with things like this, how do you test drive a routine? I mean, you've got to think it's funny yourself when you're coming up with it, but then you've got to find out whether or not people are going to react to it.
That's a really, really good question. I mean, I learned it took me a while to learn it, and I there's a lot of really, really funny up and coming comics in St. Louis that I find myself as an older comic talking to now, and then I get sick of hearing myself talk. But I learned somewhere in the middle of my career if you have an idea, it's funny. It's just trust your instincts. It's funny, no matter what. It's funny. Now, it may take you a while to figure out how to explain that and let them see what you see. But I think over time you get a little bit more skill to being like, you have this thought, and it's like, how can I get them to see what I see? So if I have something that seems funny, I'll try it that night. Like, if there's a certain how there's this, like, it starts as a kernel of idea and it ends as this joke that's killing on stage. There's somewhere in the middle there where I'm like, no, this is good enough to put on stage. It's going to go through. Seinfeld said once you do it on stage, it's going to take about a year to a year and a half to get it in its final form. So I like to get it on stage as soon as possible because it's going to take a while to massage it.
Then which generates the greater emotion? And I mean great in terms of large. When you come up with a routine or a bit that is very successful and people laugh like crazy, or it's a bomb?
Well, I mean, those are
the two extremes.
Two extremes.
Yeah. Which one affects you?
Luckily, I don't have the latter as much as I used to. But those used to hurt quite a bit, and they still do. That's the thing that bothers me. So at some point, I thought, well, I'm good enough now where I'm just never going to feel that again. You do have a bad set every now and then.
Sure.
But your recovery time gets a lot better. I think I'm an optimist. I think the joy of the most fun is when the new idea just starts to work. Like it just starts working. Like, oh, this is going to be a fun ride to get it to its final form. And I think that's I'm an optimist. I think that overshadows the defeat of having a bad bit.
But if there is a bomb, as they must be occasionally, is it immediately out of the routine, or do you rework it?
No. Like I was saying earlier, I still think you need to trust the idea. You just told it wrong. You didn't explain right now, as I'm not using my words very clearly. No, like you just didn't tell it the right way. Yeah. So I'll try it again, and then sometimes you got to put it away for about 6 months. It's like I'm just not at the point in my career. I need to come back. I do a lot of crossword puzzles. I do the New York Times crossword puzzle, and I'm maybe a Wednesday guy at best. But
right in the middle of the difficult.
I don't even look at Fridays, but every now and then, I'll take a look at it, and it's like I can't get it. I'm getting nowhere. And then the next morning, I'll look at it again, and you I don't know, you're coming at it from a different angle. I think jokes and crossword puzzles are pretty similar in that regard.
You're getting ready for the performance at the Funny Bone this weekend, and on Sunday you're going to be performing for kids primarily.
Yeah.
We talked about this last year, but refresh all of our memories with regard to how that works and what you're doing.
Yeah, you know what? When I talked to you last year, that was the first time I had tried it in any market, was in St. Louis, and we had, partially thanks to you, Don, we had like a couple hundred people came, and it was great. It was better than I would have expected. Basically, my friends Sean O'Brien and Tim Convey, they're the opening acts. They'll go up and do, I don't know, 5-10 minutes each, and then I'll do about 30-35 minutes. And it's not a kiddie show. Mm-hmm. It's just material that's appropriate for all ages. And then after that, the three of us will stay on stage, and we'll invite the kids up, and we make it almost like a talk show. We'll interview the kid, and if they got a joke they want to tell. We had some kids dance last year. We let them tell a joke, and it's pretty neat. It's a lot of fun.
What's the age range generally for these kids?
Well, I say, it's primarily for like 5th grade and up, but we're not going to card, Don. Most of these kids don't have driver's license, so there's really no way to check them out. Last year, there were like some 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds, and I think they had a great time. But to really appreciate it, I think it's sort of that middle school, high school kids really get into it.
What kind of jokes do they tell? I mean, is it like Halloween where they have these
Yeah,
silly
most
things?
of them are, like a knock-knock joke or, but there's a couple that wrote their own material, and it's really cool to see. My niece, Tori, basically took it upon herself to roast me for about a minute and a half, and the crowd really enjoyed that. Yeah.
Well, when people roast you from the audience, what's your reaction to that? Comedians get heckled a lot.
Yeah, they do. It's a lot easier than it seems. You just sort of – I had somebody give me some advice early on, like just sit back and don't use the first thing comes to your mind. And you don't have to – you don't want to use some canned response. Like, and it's like then everybody, it just seems sort of – silly, but just if you had one of your friends and you were sitting around drinking beers and somebody said something stupid, you're comfortable with that person, and you probably would just say, the first or second thing that pops in your mind, and people would probably laugh because they enjoy it. Now, if things are going horribly in the show, it's going to be a little trickier. But usually they're on my side. The audience wants to see you do well, and if somebody shouts something out, I'd rather they didn't. But if they do, you just trust your instincts. Yeah.
Going back to the kids, and you're working with them. This is only your second year. You did it last year. Did you get any material for yourself that came from these youngsters? That's
a great question. No, I didn't. Maybe a couple of stories I'm thinking, but. Every now and then, I have learned, I do talk to the crowd a little bit more in my act. Not a lot. I like to do it maybe, a little 10%. But every now and then, I will get something from the crowd. The other day, I was in Youngstown, Ohio, and I don't know, I was just a little bored, and I asked this guy, I go, what do you do for a living, sir? He goes,
bored in Youngstown, Ohio?
Yeah, can you imagine? On stage, I was like, it was the end of the week, and I was like, I've done my act too many times. Let me take a little quick break from my act and talk to the crowd. And I asked this guy, what do you do? And he goes, I'm a carpenter. I go, what do you make? He goes, well, actually, I build receptionist desks for hospitals. He goes, that's all the receptionist desks in all the hospitals in Youngstown, Ohio, I made. And I just took a minute, and I was like, I bet like the goal for somebody like you would be to have a receptionist desk so good that somebody was like, hey, you know what? I've been sitting in this ER for an hour. Wait a minute. Is that mahogany? That's really what is that molding? That's very, very nice. So the doctor's ready to see you. Just a second. I want to check this out. That's.
I wonder how many hospitals there are in Youngstown, Ohio.
Probably one. Yeah.
Right. One desk.
Yeah.
Very proud of that.
Yeah, I did. I was talking about how I'm 50 and I'm single, and some lady shouted out one time, "Why don't you just meet some young girl and be her sugar daddy?" I was like, "Well, ma'am, because I don't have any sugar, all right? I'm not sure I could be a splendid daddy at this point in my life."
When does a guy like yourself, Greg, or, well, you can only relate to yourself, decide, I'm pretty funny. I think I'll become a comic?
Man, that's a good question. I think in grade school, and especially at Kirkwood High School, I had sort of an irrational need to be the center of attention. I don't know. I don't think I had an outlet for it.
Were you a class clown?
Yeah, I was. Yeah. I remember I ran for class president when I was a sophomore, and I won. And the only reason I ran was so I could get up and give a speech in front of everybody in the school. And I just told jokes the whole time, and I won. And then I had to be the class president for a year. I really didn't care about that. They used to do morning announcements. As a media member, you probably remember Franklin McCauley was a principal.
Oh, absolutely.
Kirkwood.
Franklin's a good friend.
Yeah, and I used to do impressions of Franklin over the morning announcements. And that was my first comedy gig, I think.
But then you have to decide to become a professional. After the West Point misstep, that's when that happened. There
were some other missteps. I graduated college, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, and I took a job selling peanut butter and Pringles. I sold Jif peanut butter, Pringles potato chips, Sunny Delight drink to grocery stores for several years. Really? And I was making a lot of money. It was a company called Procter & Gamble, and I was doing stand-up a little bit at night. And this was 8 years in. I was in this sales call. I was getting ready to go into Kroger stores. They used to be in St. Louis, but it was a Cincinnati division. There was probably 200 stores, and it was if this sales call went well, it was regarding Pringles, it would have been $1 million for the company, like a big deal. And I had some teammates there, and they were sort of strategizing about what do we do? What do we do? And my mind kept drifting off to a TV show I had watched the evening before. It was on USA Network called Renegade, and it was a two-parter. And the lead character, he appeared to have died at the end of that episode, and I kept thinking, well, they can't kill him off. He's the main character. And then I realized maybe I'm not as focused on the grocery business as I should.
And then it happened, and the rest is history. As
I
they
guess
say.
so. Yeah,
we got to wrap it up there, Greg. Thanks so much for being with us.
Great to see you again,
folks
Don.
That be at the Funny Bone all this weekend.
Yeah, Thursday through Sunday.
Look forward to that. Greg Warren, thank you.
Good to see you.
This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio, 90.7 KWMU.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to conservation and careful management of the state's forests to make them more resilient and better habitats for wildlife. ChooseWood.com.